Hello to all subscribers and listeners of this channel. This video is Why Evolution is Bullshit Part 2. The Multiple Reasons, 16 through 18. Evolution is the hypothesis, masquerading as a theory, that people believe is a fact. Hello again to all subscribers and listeners of the channel. This is part of the series where we will tackle 3 more criticisms of the evolution hypothesis. And here they are. Where do certain physical/chemical processes of healing come from? Where do marine mammals come from? And how do they evolve? And the major problem with speciation when it comes to the minimal population that can produce diverse and viable offspring. Also, a brief bit about snakes and where their legs went. So, without further ado, let's now go ahead and examine these 3 or 4, technically, short but important observations. Now, in the previous part, we left off at, I believe, number 15. So now we're on number 16. 16. Physical and chemical processes of healing and repairing the body. Question. How does an organism evolve a complex process like repairing a broken bone? Bone repair is relatively complex yet a vital process for the health, safety, and longevity of an organism. The process usually starts with a signal sent to the brain as soon as the bone is broken, followed by an immediate response of blood clots forming along the holes in the bone. Next, protein fills in and becomes a plug to the affected area. The next step is the different sequences in process of inflammation, followed by stem cell migration. Then the stem cells migrate from bone marrow and blood in order to begin the process of bone and cartilage regeneration within that area that has the breakage. And in the description, I'm going to have a more detailed explanation that's going to be in the links provided below. So check the links in the description and you'll see more detail about how this process goes and how it operates in every organism that has a bone break. Another very complex process, healing broken skin. And throughout this part, I'm going to break down some excerpts from different websites and resources that break down the processes of healing wounds, usually flesh wounds. So let's continue. And this is an excerpt from, I believe, owlcation.com. I'm going to put the link in the description below for this also. And I quote, "The blood clotting process is a complex process and involves many reactions. However, the process can be summarized in 3 steps." They listed 4, even though they said 3. I don't know why they did that. Slight mistake, but step 1, a complex known as prothrombin activator is produced by a long sequence of chemical reactions. Step 2, the prothrombin activator converts a blood protein called prothrombin into another protein called thrombin. Sorry if I'm having a hard time pronouncing these. Step 3, thrombin converts a soluble blood protein called fibrinogen into an insoluble protein called fibrin. Step 4, the fibrin exists as a solid fiber or solid fibers which form a tight mesh over the wound. The mesh traps platelets and other blood cells and forms the blood clot. Prothrombin and fibrinogen are always present in our blood, but they aren't activated until prothrombin activator is made when we're injured, unquote. That was the entire quote from the website. Again, owlcation.com, and you're going to see links to that in the description box. Now, another set of things that are on owlcation.com. On the site is listing the 12 actual clotting factors that have to go in sequence exactly the right way when it comes to healing any wound and every wound that an organism is going to get. at least living organisms that are not plants. Again, this is the entire list, and I'm going to repeat the list word for word from the website. So, the first clotting factor of the 12 clotting factors. Factor 1 is fibrinogen, which is produced by the liver. Factor 2 is prothrombin, produced by the liver. Factor 3, the tissue factor, or thromboplastin, produced by the damaged tissue and the platelets. Factor 4, calcium ions produced by the bone and absorbed through the small intestine lining. Factor 5, the proaccelerin, or labile factor, produced by the liver and the platelets. Factor 6, proconvertin, or stable factor, produced by the liver. Factor 7, anti-hemophilic factor, produced by the platelets in the lining of the blood vessels. Factor 8, the Christmas factor. I don't know why it's called that, but it's called the Christmas factor, produced by the liver. Factor 9, Stewart-Prower factor, produced by the liver. Factor 10, plasma thromboplastin, antecedent, produced by the liver. Factor 11, Hageman factor, produced by the liver. Factor 12, fibrin stabilizing factor, produced by the liver. And like I said, check the description box to see more details about the bone repair process and the clotting process of flesh wounds. You'll see that in the description. Now, also, another process that's very interesting that a few organisms are able to utilize is the process of regenerating ripped off limbs, or in this case, a ripped off tail. A process that is very complicated. Unfortunately, it's difficult to find detailed info on how this works, but I did find a few things. The process is called autotomy, meaning self-sever. It is a process of shedding a major limb or body part that the organism then regrows. The process exists in most plants, mollusks, almost all invertebrates, and some reptiles. And it's almost non-existent in mammals. More needs to be learned if scientists are going to figure out a way to bring limb regeneration to human beings or any other mammal-type species. Another process that's very complex and very interesting and doesn't really all the way fit with the evolutionary hypothesis. The development of calluses. How do calluses form? And calluses are the thick, hardened part of the skin that forms as a protective barrier between soft, delicate tissues and hard, dangerous materials in environments that the body might be encountering. Now, some questions about these very delicate but very important processes. A. Which organism was the first organism to form blood clots? B. When did vertebrate animals attain the ability to repair damaged bone tissue? C. How and why do certain organisms have the ability to regrow limbs while others do not? D. Where did the process of calluses or callus formation come from? And how did the body learn to do all these things, all these processes, despite the fact that every single one of these processes is an unconscious process? As in, they go on without the organism necessarily knowing that's happening. The organism doesn't need to know that's happening. The process just goes on its own anyway. How did that occur? And what was the first organism that did that? No one seems to know. Number 17. Where did the marine mammals come from? Especially the cetaceans. Now, there's this assumption about marine mammals, an assumption that has been pushed by artists and evolutionists' emotional ideology. And here it is. Marine mammals somehow evolved from mammals that walked on land, but regained the ability to be aquatic. So, the evolutionists, how do they explain this bizarre reversal phenomenon? Well, they say that mammals somehow regained the ability to swim and regenerate aquatic characteristics for some reason. The main story is that there were two ancient animals. One was called, I believe it's pronounced Pakicetus, and the other was called Ambulocetus. Pachycetus look very much like a wolf-like type creature, while Ambulocetus is described as being fully aquatic, which doesn't make sense, but okay. The scientists don't seem to explain well enough how they know this. So some really good questions about this. Back to the water evolution hypothesis. A. So the mammals raise their offspring near water where the offspring could be swept away by strong currents. Or did they raise the offspring on land and then go back to swim in the water? I don't know. B. So despite the fact that most ungulates live very far inland, consume fresh water, and live near freshwater lakes and rivers and streams, they somehow evolved the ability to become extraordinarily good swimmers in large and salty oceans. Okay. C. Land mammals who drink fresh water evolved the ability to handle the salinity of the oceans. D. Where does the mechanism to excrete all that extra salt come from? E. Why do these artists' drawings of supposed whale ancestors add things like webbing and flippers and stuff like that to the animal, despite the fact these body parts cannot be proven with the fossil record? These features, you can't really actually see them in the fossilized material. So how did they know that they were there? I'm not sure. There's no explanation for that. So I don't know how they figured that out with those artistic renditions. But whatever. Where am I? F. Why would land mammals go to the ocean long enough to evolve into sea mammals? What would be the cause of that transition, which would take generations to happen? G. Walking and swimming are mechanically very different movements. They're especially different between ungulates and marine mammals. Where's the physical transition between the two? Where would this animal have lived, and how would it have traveled, mated, and reared young during this transition from land animal to sea animal? Someone needs to explain that. It goes from being terrestrial to aquatic somehow during all these other processes that need to survive when it comes to mating, eating, congregating. They need a better explanation for that, because I don't see any explanation for that makes sense. Next one. H. Another problem found. After perusing many articles about whale evolution, there's a reference to DNA evidence of whales having terrestrial ancestors. Last time I checked, fossilized material is not supposed to have DNA. At least fossilized material that old. So how are they using that as evidence? I don't know. But fossilized whale ancestors can store and preserve DNA now? Okay. I. Many of the reconstructions of these supposed whale ancestors are sporting physical features. Yeah, I already said that. Can be deduced from the fossil record. Oh no, they're showing not just the physical features, but they're also showing certain behaviors that cannot be proven with the fossil record, such as the swimming ability or where they moved or how they did that. It's just too much of this is speculation that they're trying to throw into us as fact. And again, you have to remember, these are artistic renditions. What an artist drew on the page or what he created on a computer, that doesn't prove anything. That's just his idea based off of what the scientists are telling him. That proves nothing. And J, just like all the other quote-unquote evidences or bits of evidence for evolution, these ancient quote-unquote whales are not showing a steady transition from one form to the next. They're showing distinctly different organisms that existed at a certain time. That's it. They're not showing that graduation from one form to the next. I've never seen that in the entire fossil record, and I'm not seeing it for this whale species thing. I'm not seeing that for their ancestors either. So again, like I said before, all they're showing is the fossil records for different species that were very similar. Nothing more, nothing less. Number 18. The minimum population for a viable offspring, or for a group of viable offspring. Let me explain. According to the studies, according to the analysis that people have done for a couple of decades, pretty much every species needs about somewhere around 1,000 or so, or more, at the very beginning of their existence in order to have a genetically viable population. Now, how did every species achieve this? But before I get to that, there's an explanation about the whole viable population thing. Basically, it has to do with inbreeding. If the population is too small, then a large portion of those individuals are going to be having offspring with an individual that they're already related to, which would create an offspring that's probably not going to live very long because it's going to have psychological or physical birth defects that stop them from having their own offspring. So basically, it just makes everyone or a large portion of the population sterile to the point where it could go extinct. That's basically the understanding. But yeah, every species apparently needs that. So if that's the case, then how did every species achieve that? If there only were 1,000 of them, where did those 1,000 come from? If there were millions of them, how did the millions of members of a species all branch out and become their own species of organism that's genetically distinct from the parent species, if they all had to have 1,000 members at the beginning each time a new species existed? Shouldn't they have split off into dozens, if not hundreds, of subspecies from the parent species? So that way, when a species evolved, one species had roughly 1,000 members change at the same time to another species in order to produce viable offspring that were separate species from the parent species. What? Like, that mathematically, that doesn't, like, I don't understand that. That had to happen every single time. For every species of plant, every species of insect, every species of fish, every species of animal, every species of mammal, that had to happen every time. And they have no way of explaining how that happened every single time. But let me break down why this is important. The reason why this is important is because of the phenomenon called inbreeding depression. That's what I was explaining earlier. Inbreeding depression is a situation where there either is A, not enough individuals within a given group, or B, the group is isolated from groups with different bloodlines. Like I said, this leads to individuals within the group breeding with close genetic relatives over and over and over. This generally causes more birth defects, more mental defects, increasing sterility or infertility, and the eventual extinction of the species. So again, in order for evolution to take place the way that we've been taught, every single species of organism that we can think of, that we can document, that we can find, at the very beginning of its existence, had to have had 1,000 or more members in each of those species over and over and over as new species were created. This will allow for more genetic diversity, which would then have led to healthier, viable offspring. But again, there doesn't appear to be a good enough explanation for how this process would occur so many times over and over and over throughout the existence of an organism. Also, the random mutations that occur more than 1,000 times in millions of species, the random mutations get passed down from parent to offspring, and then continues on to produce a different genetic species over and over and over again, with no bottleneck. Like, that makes no sense. Oh, and one more thing about the snakes. Where and when did snakes lose their legs? And why would they evolve to not have legs? What would be the point of that? Someone needs to do the same with snakes what has not been done with any other organism in the evolutionary hypothesis so far. And that is present the legged snake from ancient times, present the snake that's shrinking his legs are slowly going away, and then finally present the current snake. Present all of these in the fossil record sequentially. Show me they have legs, show the shrinking legs later on, and then show the modern snakes with no legs. Until then, the snake's body and the very existence of snakes creates another problem for the hypothesis of evolution. So until the next part in the series, that's all for now. Please like, subscribe, share, and donate to support this channel and the content that is produced on it. You have a nice day. I'm out. Peace.